Okay, so let's begin by getting some essentials out of the way. We're going to look at playing accents, moving hand to hand within single strokes to begin with. So we'll take a simple figure. I'll just play it on the sticks along with the hi-hat. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we're going to phrase that within single strokes on the snare drum. So it'll sound like this. Okay, what I'm doing there is playing alternate accents hand to hand, and in order to develop the ability to do that with a good deal of consistency, you could try this exercise where I'm just going to play an accent on every quarter note for one bar. The next bar I move it a 16th note later, then the next bar a 16th note later, and so on. So we get this 4-bar pattern. It looks something like this. And we can do the same thing with 2 accents. 1, 2, 3, 4. Or we could do the same thing through 8th note triplets. So playing the first note of the triplet, then the second partial, and then the third partial. So we get a 3-bar exercise. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Next, we're going to try that same idea, but this time, instead of playing single strokes, we're going to double the unaccented notes. So where our unaccented notes originally sound like this, we're going to then move them into double strokes. So we had this originally. So to do that, just a quick look at the technique involved. I'm not simply allowing the sticks to bounce. They'll only do that at a certain speed. If I want them to go quicker, I've got to manipulate the stick with the fingers. And so I'm just pulling the stick back into the hand after I've dropped each stroke. Enables you to get a very consistent sound out of the double strokes. So let's take a look at those 3 exercises again. First of all, the single notes through the 16th notes. Now playing the unaccented notes as double strokes. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the same thing with 2 accents. 1, 2, 3, 4. And finally, through the 8th note triplets. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, next we're going to do that same thing, but this time using flams. So I'm just going to flam those accents. Once again, with the single accent. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now with a double accent, So this is basically the Pata-Fla-Fla rudiment, and looks at the 4 different permutations of that. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and whilst on the subject of flams, there are some useful hand-to-hand flams that can enable us to move ideas around the kit. One of them is if we just take the 8th note triplet exercise that we've looked at previously and apply the flams to that, it would sound something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that movement that we have there in that first bar is the flam accent rudiment. And we can just move those accents to the toms, first of all. Or up to the cymbals. And then finally, we can move the notes that are played onto the snare onto the toms and still play the accents on the cymbals. 1, 2, 3, 4. And another hand-to-hand sticking we can apply that same principle to is the flam paradiddle. So in its basic form, it would look something like this. And then we can take it to the toms and the cymbals in the same way as we did with the flam accent. So I'll just go through that process. And you could take the flam accent and play it through 16th notes. You're not just simply limited to playing it through the 8th note triplet. And that would sound something like this. 3. And in the same way, we could take the flam paradiddle and play it through 8th note triplets, and it would start to emphasize the half note triplet. I'll start it on the snare and then move it up to the cymbals. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now that we've developed some ability with those 3 different approaches, single strokes, double strokes, and flams, let's now take a look at that initial figure that we started with. And we looked at singles, and then we didn't actually look at double strokes or flams. So I'll start with the single strokes, then doubles and flams with that initial figure. So. And obviously you can expand on that with all different orchestration ideas. I'll just show this sort of thing, moving the accents to the toms, to the cymbals. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. We can do that same thing to, once you've developed that, the ability to do that, with any figure that comes to mind, really. Another great way of practicing that would be to work through a 16th note or 8th note triplet-based reading page, such as you might find in Gary Chester's New Breed. Another great book that looks at this, this approach is Jim Blackley's Syncopated Rolls for the Modern Drummer.